So you can minimize that.
Oh,
That's okay.
minimize.
Yes.
Got it. There we go. Thank you so much. All right. Thank you so much for joining us, everyone. My name is Caitlin Gage. I am the branch leader at the Ishpeming Flag Star. And with me, I have Aaron from Paychex and a few of his colleagues as well. And we are going to be talking today about the earned sick time as well as a little bit on the minimum wage. And if there are any questions, we will save those till the end. Oh, Amy, did you have a question or? Raise your hand. Did you have a question, Amy?
I know you guys asked us to put questions in the chat, but it's showing up as chat disabled. And I just had to go in and change a bunch of settings so that I could talk to you.
Okay, so we will have questions at the end. And if you don't want to put them in the chat, you can raise your hand and I will select you and unmute you, and this will be at the end. You can also, we'll have all of our contact information at the end of the slide. So if we aren't able to get to your question for whatever reason, you can also email myself or Aaron as well. Okay, and we'll also update the chat setting as well. Thank you so much for bringing that to our attention. All right, Aaron, if you want to go ahead and take it away, I will put myself on mute.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much, Caitlin. It's been such a pleasure working with you and Flagstar Bank. To introduce myself, I am Aaron Coddington. I'm here at Paychex. I'm accompanied here. I'm accompanied here by James. James is in our HR services department, and we have Nancy as well. Nancy is one of our certified HR business partners. She's going to be available as well after this presentation to answer questions with us. So getting started here, this presentation is an introduction to the Michigan Earned Sick Time Act. My goal really is just to give you a clear understanding of how the law is going to impact your business, what you need to know to stay compliant, and some strategies to prepare. That being said, the presentation is meant to be a starting point. Okay, employment law is really complex. Every business has unique needs. My role is just to arm you with the knowledge so you can ask the right questions and make informed decisions. So with that in mind, let's dive in here. There are 4 points to my presentation, and at the end, we're going to stick around for questions, like I said. First, I'm going to do a quick overview of the law, how it came about. Then we're going to talk about the substance of the law and what some of the requirements are. Third, we're going to discuss some of the fine print so you're prepared for compliance. And finally, the big one is what you should be doing now in order to prepare. Next slide, Caitlin. So first is the background. This has been debated since 2018. In 2019, Michigan adopted the PML, which was the Paid Medical Leave Act. Now, the Earned Sick Time Act that we're talking about was enacted to replace PML, and it had an effective date of last Friday, February 21st, 2025. Now, late at night last Thursday on the 20th, a bipartisan agreement was reached, which made a few small adjustments to the Earned Sick Time law. This may still change in the future. It is still being contested. Okay, so what are the basics? First, the basic purpose of the law was to make a certain amount of sick time available to employees in Michigan. Employees can either accrue sick time as prescribed in the chart you see on the screen, or they can get an equivalent amount of time which can be front-loaded at the beginning of a chosen policy period. Now, this law applies to almost every business, and it covers full-time and part-time employees. This includes seasonal employees and even remote employees working within Michigan State. So just because someone's working from home and they're half a state away, it doesn't mean that they are not eligible for earned sick time. Now, there are some exceptions right now. The biggest exception is that per the latest updates to the law, businesses are not required to comply until 3 years after they first hire an employee. So that means if you hired your first employee last October, you've got until October 2027 before you need to begin accruing sick time. But if you hired your first employee before February 21st of 2022, you already need to be accruing sick time. Now, if you have fewer than 11 employees, you don't need to comply until October 1st of this year. So there's little nuances here, and that's kind of what we're here for, to kind of walk you through that. And that's why HR professionals are around to help guide us through this. But important to know right now, if you have 11 or more employees and you hired your first employee more than 3 years ago, you must start accruing sick time immediately. There are a few other exceptions though. If you have any employees who are part of the federal government, they are exempted. Anyone covered under the Railroad Unemployment Insurance Act it's an exception. And there are companies that already offer unlimited PTO, meaning that all time off is automatically approved. Lastly, if you have union employees with a collective bargaining agreement, you should probably contact a labor attorney. There can be additional nuances there. Now, regarding how your employees can actually use the sick time, employees can use the sick time as it is accrued. Typically, it's used in 1 hour increments. That's how we do it here at Paychex. Now, if you meet the requirements for accrual, accruals would have started last Friday, February 21st. But if you hire any new employees going forward, the accrual needs to start immediately on their date of hire. The first hours worked, begin accruing this ESTA time off. Now, you may withhold new employees from using any sick time for their first 120 days of employment. They need to be accruing the sick time, but you don't have to let them use it for the first 120 days of their employment. When they're using their ESTA sick time, they can use 3 consecutive sick days without a doctor's note. And finally, you should know at the end of a benefit year, any unused sick time may carry over or it may be paid out. That's one of the stipulations of the new agreement. Your policy year can either be a calendar year or any other 12-month period, but you'll need to decide and let your employees know what your benefit year is. Okay, it's very important that you allow employees to use their earned sick time. There are many legitimate uses according to the law. This includes any mental or physical illnesses, treatments, even preventative care. And this includes not just the employees, but their employees' families. Meetings regarding the mental health and disabilities of employees' children can also apply. And if a place of business is closed for public health emergency. Now, I'm going to backtrack here really quickly. It's very important that we use the term family very broadly here. The state website says that family includes, and I quote, any individual related by blood or affinity whose close association with the employee is the equivalent of a family relationship. So when in doubt, don't make your own judgment call. If they say it's family, if your employee calls someone a family member, take it at face value. In most cases, to avoid problems, just let them use the time. Now, employees can exercise rights. So please be advised that this law was designed for the protection of the employees. You do not want to be on the wrong side of this. That being said, employers must be careful not to retaliate against any employee for using this law to their advantage. Do not deny your employees from using their earned sick time. Do not take adverse or disciplinary action as long as the employee is acting within the law. And if there's an investigation, do not impede your employees' participation or cooperation in that investigation. Now, some of your businesses might actually keep attendance points. If an employee is using their ESTA time, do not count this against their attendance points. That would be considered retaliation. Employees can file complaints at any time for 3 years after an incident occurs. Therefore, employers must retain their records for at least 3 years. That's a 3-year statute of limitations on the ESTA law. If there is a violation, employees can file either a civil action or they can file a claim with the Department of Labor and Economic Opportunity to investigate the employer. Again, save all employee payment records for at least 3 years. That includes past employees too. Okay, everyone needs to start preparing right away, whether this applies to you now or not. And it's not on this list right here, but you need to determine exactly what your status is. Do you have 11 employees? Will you have 11 employees before October 1st? When did you hire your first employee? Now you need to determine how you're going to track accruals and balances. Are you going to front load the hours? You're going to create a blanket PTO policy that meets or exceeds the requirement? Are you going to keep track of everything on napkins? As soon as possible, share all this information with your employees too. You are required to give them a copy of the law. You have to communicate to them how your company is complying. Make sure they know how much sick time they're going to get, when the accrual started or when it's going to start. Also, let them know your personal company policies. Let them know if you meet or exceed the mandate. Next is train your frontline supervisors. You just don't want someone going rogue. It's very important that all the leaders at your company are aware of your employees' rights to use the time off without fear of retaliation. One manager at your company who doesn't understand the law can put your company in danger of a violation. Next, be sure to plan your budget. If you've never offered any PTO before, do the calculations to figure out how much this could cost your business. Now, for a quick example, if you have 10 employees earning 40 hours of sick time at an average of $20 an hour, that's going to cost your business almost $9,000 a year. If you've never offered sick time before, you need to be prepared for the cost. And lastly, make sure you update your employee handbook. We can't stress this enough. Your policy needs to meet the ESTR requirements, and it has to be in writing. So we're from Paychex, obviously, so we have to tell you how Paychex helps you stay compliant as well. I'm going to be honest. I'm really more of a tech guy than anything else. So I'm going to tell you a couple things about the tech. First, it's going to be helpful for you to have the right payroll platform, something that helps you and doesn't hinder you. Paychex provides employees with pay stubs. We show the exact amounts of sick time that have been accrued and used and what the remaining balances are. And we can help you communicate all of this to your employees too. We can make sure you have a compliant handbook so that it's all in writing. All right, here's where the technology shines. We have 3 ways that you can use it. First off, if you're really highly motivated to use your own Excel spreadsheet to track sick time accrual and balances, just use this for payroll. Caitlin, next slide. So if you're just using us for report utilization, each time you run your payroll, you'll get a bundle of really helpful reports. So even if you're just using a napkin, you at least want to have good payroll to track things. Of course, it always makes more sense though when we turn off our time off accrual service. When that's on, better known as TOA, time off accrual allows you to add custom time off policy right into your payroll account so we can keep track of everything for you. Just like it showed on the other slide, you have to accrue 1 hour for every 30 hours worked. The Paychex system with time off accrual does that automatically. Some people, though, still prefer a full service timekeeping solution. This is the top of technology with time punching, time off requests, and more. But like James here told me, technology is like a hammer. You need a hammer to build a house, but the hammer doesn't build the house on its own. You need direction. You need people to take action. So James here sitting next to me, he's actually from the HR services department. He's going to discuss how we can support you to make the change successfully for your business, as well as any other potential changes that might come down the road.
Could you go to that? Thank you, Caitlin. So like Aaron mentioned, we do also have the support of SHRM certified HR business partners here at Paychex. One of our finest, brightest shining stars, of which Nancy is on the call today. And what we do is you'll have the ability to get a personalized assessment where we'll go through your current policies, provided that you have them in an employee handbook, and be able to address the things that need to be changed and make sure that you're ahead of the curve for changes that are coming down the line. When we hopped on with Nancy a couple weeks ago to start discussing this call, she let us know that she was already working on this with her Michigan customers. So that's one of the biggest things that we offer for you guys is the ability to have that proactive support through that personalized assessment. And then again, we'll help you create the employee policy management or employee policies around this sick time, right? What are we going to do as far as PTO? Is it going to be earned sick time? Is it going to be that blanket PTO policy that Aaron mentioned? And we'll take that further with going through the wellness of your employees, the benefits of your employees, what you're able to offer, what may be available to you that you were never aware of to be able to offer, and keep you in compliance with safety and OSHA. With the way that the world is today, since the 1900s, the onus has been put on the business owner to be able to prove that everything that they did was correct, and not on the employee to prove that you've wronged them. So that's where we come into play in making sure that you're protected.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, no, thanks, James. Yeah, James here is awesome. Nancy is amazing. They're both going to be sticking around too after Caitlin talks again for a question and answer. Caitlin, back to you.
Thank you so much, guys. So, wanting to talk a little bit about how Flagstar can help with a lot of these. We have a wide variety of solutions to assist clients and potential clients. One of them being a business checking. We have a wide array of business checkings, from a no frills to a fully loaded. There's a checking account solution for your business. We have some business lending options. I will work closely with you to create that lending solution that's custom built for your business needs. As Aaron said, sometimes having to come up with $10,000 on the spot can be very daunting for some business owners. So we provide some ways on how we can kind of help fill in that gap. We have some treasury management services to streamline your company's operations and boost productivity. And as well, we have Aaron and his team with Paychex, focusing this. They allow you to focus on growing your business, not running it. Here are some of our Flagstar checking accounts that we have. As I said, we have some that are no frill with no minimum fees, and then we have some that are fully loaded. And all of this information is also in your goodie bags, and will also be emailed to the virtual attendees as well with the PowerPoint, and then we'll also be sending a follow-up email. So next, we're going to talk a little bit about, we're going to have a little bit of our Q&A. And if you could please put any questions you have in the Q&A box, that is the box that you will want to put those in, and I will kind of enunciate those for Aaron.
Any questions out there? We do have a certified payroll expert on the phone. I'm sorry, an HR expert on the phone, as well as a payroll expert on the phone. So what kind of questions do you guys have?
So our first question is from Bill Raymond with Peninsula Power Coating. If you front load, do you not have to track?
It's probably a good question for Nancy, because she can give you real world experience with this, but I'll tell you that tracking is always important because you need to make sure you're maintaining balances properly. But yeah, Nancy, what do you say?
Yeah, can you hear me? Okay.
Yep.
Yes, it's super important to track, especially if you have an attendance policy, because there are unfortunately some people who will abuse the system. But once the sick time has been used, then that's important to make sure that they've not used too much or they haven't used enough. It's very important to make sure that you have that, especially if you have a policy for attendance and you hold people accountable for that. It's important to make sure that you have that system in place. Also for leave tracking, in case somebody takes a leave of absence, it's important to track all the sick time.
Don't have to carry over now, right?
There's a follow-up question, then we'll get to some. If you front load, do you have to carry over?
Yes, if they haven't used it. You can put a cap on there for the amount. But yes, it will be carried over and to the next year.
I'm confused then because the stuff I'm reading, that's not what we're seeing out there.
Thought that was changed.
That
on
was
Friday.
changed with the last signage.
Yeah, you're right. They did change the law and they will allow a payout. It's either it has to be a carryover or a payout now.
Yes.
Mhm.
One or the other?
No,
No.
that's not what they put out there.
Sure. Yeah. How are you reading it?
I picked mine up through SBAM and the latest updates were if you front load, you don't have to carry over the following year. Have to track it.
To track it.
Yeah, we'll double check on that law. There was some fine print there that was a little bit confusing when they revamped it. So we'll double check on that for sure. Yeah, just give us some time and I'll double check on that.
Okay.
And we'll follow up with that. All right, so it looks like Michael Bradford, to clarify, businesses with less than 10 employees to start on October 1st, while those with more than 10 employees have begun last Friday.
And I think you had that in the presentation, correct?
Yeah, I'm not sure I understand the question, how it was phrased. What is the question?
It's just clarifying that businesses with less than 10 to start on October 1st, while others with more than 10 began last Friday.
Yes, assuming that you have had your employees for at least 3 years, right? So there was there's a grace period of 3 years for any businesses with that have employees. But yes, if that's correct, if you've had your employees for at least 3 years, then you have the grace period until October to actually begin implementation on this.
Okay.
If you have more than 10 employees, effective immediately.
All right. And then is there a difference for part-time and full-time? That is in the PowerPoint, and I can tell you, yes, it is, Laura. Aaron, what's the quick calculation between part-time and full-time?
No, both of them need to be accruing at the 1 hour for every 30 hours worked.
Okay.
They have to be accruing the same. Yeah, you're obviously going to see differences in how quickly they accrue, but no, this is required for all employees unless they're an employee of the federal government or one of those rare exceptions. They all need to be accruing.
Thank you. Renee asks, we already have a PTO policy where staff that works 20 plus hours a week earns PTO time. Is this okay to comply?
As long as it includes sick, personal, or vacation, it's all in one policy, as long as it has that minimum amount that they need to have for the sick time that's required. And also I have an answer for the front-loaded sick time. They did update that about 8 hours ago. And I do see that if you front load, it does not need to carry over, but you'd have to front load at the beginning of your next time that you front load. And if you do with the accrual, then it does carry over or pay out.
I did want to clarify too on Renee's question. You asked if there were the PTO policy where staff works 20 plus hours a week earns PTO time. PTO time is fine, but this will apply to all of your staff though, not just staff that works 20 plus hours a week. You would find that employees that are working less than 20 hours a week also need to accrue.
Looks like Renee had a follow-up question. How much do you front load for part-time staff that work 3 hours a month?
The situation with a front load for employees, you can have two different policies. You can have a policy for full-time and a policy for sick time. You can split that as long as they meet the minimum requirements. So if you want to have sick time for part-time employees and have them on accrual method, you could have them on an accrual method. So at least they work 1 hour for every 30 hours work. Because there are times and situations where you have employees that work 5 hours a month. So if you have them the accrual method, the 1 hour for every 30 hours work, they're in compliance. And then you can have a separate sick policy for full-time employees. So you can separate that out based on the employee's classification, but it has to be all for part-time or all for full-time if you have the two separate policies.
Thank you, Nancy. Follow-up question. Can you require an employee to use their sick time before they use their general PTO? For example, if a business has general PTO and sick time, should they be put in all one bucket, or can a business require their sick time is used first, regardless if they are sick?
Well, generally, PTO means that you have a paid time off policy, which includes sick, vacation, personal, everything. So you want to call it either vacation and sick time, or you call it PTO. So you wouldn't have a separate sick and PTO because PTO includes sick. So there would be a bundled policy, PTO, or vacation and sick.
Thank you, Nancy. And then follow up, how does this work for salaried workers?
They're going to accrue or be front-loaded sick time just like everyone else. It can be a seasonal, temporary, full-time, part-time. Everyone's entitled to the sick leave.
But it is my understanding that salaried employees are considered 40 hours per week.
Yes, yes.
Did we have any other questions from the room?
Just wondering what happens if you start the year below 10,
Mm-hmm.
and you 10 some point during the year. How does it change your minds?
Sure.
You get above 11.
We had a question here. If you started the year with below 10, but then you get over 10 throughout the year, how does that kind of affect these policies and whatnot?
Well, the amount does increase to the 72 hours once you have over that threshold. So it's going to look at the calendar year, what your average is. So that's how it's going to base this sick leave on, is what your average employee number is within that calendar year. Just like a determination whether an employee is a full-time employee, they work more than 30 hours a week for more than 120 calendar days out of the year, they're considered full-time.
Now, based on your companies? What the
Yes.
company is for full-time? 'Cause for my staff, it's 36 hours to be full-time.
They work more than 30 hours a week for more than 120 calendar days out of the year, they're considered full-time employees.
So if they work more than 30 for more than 120 days out of the year, they're considered full-time.
But for me, it's 36 hours to be full-time.
Yes, but just as a minimum is what she was saying. That's what the minimum is to be considered full-time. You can work more based on your company's policy and et
Right.
cetera. And that's why it's always good to make sure you have that, as Aaron said, clearly lined out. All right. Oh, looks like we've got a couple more questions in the chat. I read variable hours employees are exempt. Can you define this?
Variable defining meaning they work here and there, or variable, how are these employees defined? Can they clarify that as a variable?
Yes, Renee, if you could please ask, what do you mean by variable? And while Renee types that, we'll follow up. I currently don't have any employees, but hope to hire starting early summer. When would I start having to be in compliance?
I think Aaron notated that on the presentation. Was it 2027? Yes, it's 2027 is when they would start accruing or front loading if they're not hiring till the summer.
Correct. Yeah. The term compliance is always funny, right? Because you always have to be compliant. It just depends on what compliance means for you. In this case, you wouldn't need to necessarily start time off accrual for 3 years, but it's never too soon to actually make sure that you have a plan in place You never know what's going to happen. And sick time and benefits have been a staple for a successful business since the beginning of time. So I wouldn't put anything off too long and just wait the 3 years and hope it all pans out. Have a plan ahead of time.
When you front load, is it an annual, quarterly? What is the time frame for front loading?
Be based off of your policy. So if you're front loading and you're going to do it every February of every year, you just have that, you have to have that time determined. So either it's calendar year or it's their anniversary year or it's February 21st to be in compliance with the law. So it depends on what they have set as their specific policy. They just have to be consistent.
Thank you. Should we expect any more changes to the ESTA moving forward, or is this what we can act on?
I anticipate changes because I work with several states that already have sick time in place and it's consistently changing. So yes, I do foresee that there will be changes within 6 months to a year, potentially.
Mhm. And that's something that I will say that Paychex does really good is, like I said, things were just updated like 8 hours ago. So it's nice to have somebody in your corner handling the compliance aspect. And Nancy and Aaron have gone over, have taken other businesses' HR books, made sure they're in compliance and policies and manuals, make sure they are compliant, or they can even just help you write one by basically stating, I want this, 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 and this. Okay, perfect. This is how we can do that for you. So that is something that they can help do for you. Renee had a follow-up question she was looking for an explanation on what variable hour employees means. She read that variable hour employees are exempt, but we're not sure what variable hour employees mean.
Yeah, I did read a little snippet about how employees who choose their own hours may be exempted. So yeah, if you have someone that's maybe working per diem who chooses when they want to work and when they don't want to, makes it kind of hard for a business owner to have a sick time policy for someone that comes in when they want to and not when they don't want to. Sort of defeats the purpose. So I think that might be what you're referring to, Renee.
Yeah.
There was also the designation of a 1099 in there, and same idea. When you're operating with 1099s, you can't have them sign off on sick and save policy times, and hold them to the same expectations that you would a W-2 employee.
Mm-hmm.
Valerie was confused still about the salary. They're paid every other week, no matter what, whether they took vacation or sick time. So if they specifically take a sick day, then it's an added amount paid to them during that pay period.
No, yeah, no, it just is what their policy said. If they have PTO, it's anything. It could be sick, vacation, personal. But when they separate it out, vacation, sick, it's a little easier to track that it is an actual sick day, especially if you have an attendance policy and you're, wanting to make sure you hold people accountable for attendance. It's tricky when you have PTO because you have to determine whether it was a personal, whether it was a sick or was a vacation.
Renee said she has seasonal staff that only work from June to August. And what she read was they can use for 120 days of hire. Do we still have to do accrual since they will be gone before they can use it?
And if they return within 6 months, the amount would be back in their bank account for sick time.
All right. If they use vacation time, does that apply to accruing sick time?
No, it's only what their regular hours worked. Overtime, commissions, per diem, things like that don't count towards earning sick time. It's every hour, regular hour worked.
But overtime hours would still work.
Yes, but it's not accounted for when accruing the sick time. It only counts for regular hours worked. which is different in Michigan than it is in other states, but overtime doesn't count towards it.
So if your staff is working overtime, so they work 42 hours. You don't accrue those 2 hours?
The question was if a individual works 42 hours and so 2 hours more, do they not accrue those extra 2 hours towards their accruals?
Only goes towards their regular hours worked at this time, but that could change.
That's not what
You're
you
ripping
said,
off your
right?
employees then.
Well, you're not gonna count it as
Really?
1.5 hours.
No, you wouldn't count it,
But
but
you
you
still count it as an
you
hour.
count 42 hours,
Yeah,
but you wouldn't count it as 43 and a half.
no.
Count it as 42. Right?
So we would count it as 42 hours, correct?
You can. Because I heard you say that you wanted to protect your employee and make sure that your employees being treated fairly. You can allow them to accrue more than the law is requiring you to do minimally. And we would recommend that, of course, provided that you can budget for it and it fits in the budget. But
You're not accruing that time and a half. You're just counting their hours. So if they work 42 hours,
then you could count it that way. Yeah, absolutely. We're just saying that the law is saying that you have to give an hour for every 32. But you could, have it set up in your policy that they get an hour for every hour worked, whether that be overtime or regular.
no, I'm not.
Can you provide a little more insight into the accrual when we start talking about overtime and the number of hours and things of that nature, please?
Well, I mean, I guess, what do you mean by that? Can you go back to the Zoom?
Mhm.
What do you mean by that, Caitlin? I guess, so I'm not sure how I want to kind of start the sentence. I guess, so he had asked, if you're having them work 42 hours a week and you're only providing 40 hours, worth of time, you're shorting your employee 2 hours towards that accrual. Nobody's saying that you have to cap it at 40 hours as far as the earned. It's just saying that you're not required to give them an earned hour above 40 hours. So you can absolutely do more than that. And if it fits within your budget, then that's awesome. I mean, do it for your employees. Give them that hour for every hour. That's great. Just what we're saying is that the law only requires you to do it at a 1 for every 30 hours worked, up to 40 hours for 10 or fewer, or 72 hours for 11 or more.
Yes, and I can piggyback on that too. It does not include overtime, holiday, bonuses, commissions, supplemental pay, piece rate, tips, or gratuities. It's only regular hours worked.
So I have an employee that works 60 hours in a week. By rights, they would have earned 2 hours. I'm not giving them any extra, but they work 60 hours.
You can, if you want to, if your policy, you can have those hours. They're just not required to account for the hour for every hour they work for 30 hours. Yes.
So the hour for every 30 hours worked, is that per week?
The question was, is the hour for every 30 per week?
Well, I mean, if they work 40 hours a week, they're going to earn. It depends on, it's 30 hours work because they could work 30 hours in 2 weeks. They could work 30 hours a month. They're just going to earn 1 hour for every 30 hours work.
What you're saying then about the 60 hours a week
Mhm.
is that you're stopping at 30, or you can.
No, you're stopping at 40.
At 4, yeah.
No,
At 4.
the regular hours is 40.
But it doesn't make sense.
I agree. It doesn't make sense.
If the law is for every 30 hours worked, and I work 60 hours, I should get 2 hours,
Right.
regardless of when it's worked, if it's worked all in the same week or not. This has nothing to do with how you're paid.
This sounds like it's just gonna come back and bite us.
Doesn't have
Yeah,
anything-
It does say that it's only regular hours. It states that it's not including overtime, bonuses, commissions, or anything like that. So if your policy, what I would refer you back to is your policy. If your policy allows you to earn based out more hours than the 30 hours, then you can do that. And as long as they get the 40 hours per year or the 72 hours per year, depending on your employer size, then you're in compliance. It's just the minimum accrual,
Yeah,
meaning the
these
minimum amount would be
Yes.
1 hour for every 30 hours worked. So you can have 2 hours. You could definitely have a policy that does that as long as you're reaching that minimum paid sick time amount, which is the 40 hours or the 72 hours based on your employer size.
Yes, this is just the minimum. You can do more, but you have to make sure again that the point is that your policy states that and it's very consistent. This is just the minimum.
But they'll never make 72 hours in a year.
That, it doesn't add up.
Doesn't add up.
So did they round the amount to give an extra 3.5 hours to make it an extra day? To make the 72 hours, 9 days
There-
versus 8.5?
40 hours a week, 52,
So you can take the full day.
that's 69.3 hours a year.
Not 72
It's
hours.
not 72.
So front loading, you would think you could front load the 69 if you're only doing it on 40 hours a week. And they get 80 hours of vacation a year. They're never gonna work 28, right?
Right.
Cause they're gonna take some
They'll
time
never
off.
make 72 hours in a year, never.
Okay, so what we'll do is I have Bill's card and we'll break this down. I'll get with Nancy and Aaron and we can get some specifics on
Okay.
how that calculations can kind of work out. Again, these are the minimum numbers and it's based on a lot of, so how I like to describe it is very similar to the business cashier's checks and releasing because governments set the minimum, but your company has to be at least here, but it can be at more earlier, etc. So they're just stating the minimum. So we can
Public company in their right mind will go above it.
well, and I think that's where a lot of it comes into play is because you can always go above and beyond, but you don't have to. This is establishing something that we haven't really had before. So they're trying to just set the minimum right now. Because this is, again, something very new and still everyone's trying to still figure it out. And this is just the minimum. You don't have to go above, but you have to do at least this. Oh, looks like we had a couple more questions pop up. We have staff that will not earn 72 in a year. Is that okay?
Yes. As long as they have a policy in place that's 1 hour for every 30 hours worked. As long as that's your policy. I have, for example, a client that's a dance studio and they have dancers that are instructors that teach dance lessons. They work 5 hours a month. As long as they have 1 hour for every 30 hours worked, they're in compliance.
Okay.
Caitlin, really quickly, I do think there was some confusion on this screen too about minimum paid sick time. When we say minimum paid sick time, we're saying that is the minimum paid sick time under the circumstances that an employee is working full-time and earns that. You cannot offer them less than 40 hours or 72 hours in a year if they have earned that. However, that doesn't necessarily mean that they will earn that amount.
Yes. I formed my business in 2024. I have no employees currently. Does the 3 year from when? My first hire, my incorporation date, or October 1st, 2025?
That is 3 years from the time that your first employee starts working for you. That would be their hire date, I believe.
Yes. Okay, and then I think you could get 72 hours available if they carry it over.
But if you don't have to carry over.
Yeah.
Correct.
That makes sense. Yep. If they earned 50 hours and then carried over and never used it, they could get up to 72 if you have 11 employees or more. Yep.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and then looks like Jesse just had a calculation, did the math, which we did talk about. That is the minimum. So this was the calculation, that was the question.
Yeah, that the math seems to math. Yeah, it's so it would require carryover in that case.
Yeah.
Okay.
But you have to do a minimum of 72 hours.
Only if they've worked enough hours to have accrued more than 72 hours by working 30 hours and accruing an hour for every 30. So it's kind of a moot point that they can't get there in 1 year. It's not saying that you have to give them a minimum of 72 hours if you have 11 or more employees, no matter how much they've worked. They're just saying that you have to, as long as they're hitting those thresholds. All we're doing is pointing out that they're not going to hit that threshold in 1 year, which is just great news. The only way they're going to hit it is with that carryover. So it's not a gotcha moment where they're saying 72 hours, but there's no way to get there. So we're coming with our fine book. It's just saying that, you know, as long as they worked 72 30-hour blocks, that they would have 72 hours. And again, what's most important about all of this is having it in your policies, in your employee handbook, and in your documentation and signed off on by your employees, because that's what's going to be what's binding in the end, is that they signed off on the policy that for every 30 hours that they work, they get 1 hour of sick time. Whether that stops at 40 hours or not is your decision. But what's most important from, you know, I hate to use the word court and do all that, right? But ultimately that's where compliance takes us. And what they're going to look at if and when we find our way to a courtroom is what documentation did your employees sign off on? What were the policies in there? And are they compliant? So what we need to do is make sure that everybody has 1 hour for 30 hours worked. And if they don't get to 72 because they didn't work enough hours, that's okay. They'll get there when they have carryover. And if you pay it out, they won't ever get there.
If you front load, you have 72.
Front load, yeah, different, because if you front load, you're giving them the 72 hours, whether or not they would get to that level, because front load's completely separate. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But don't you only have to front load the hours that they would earn? Doesn't have to be 72 hours. It only has to be the
If you
60.
front load and you have 11 or more, you have to front load the 72. If you front load and you have 10 or fewer employees, then it's just the 40.
Mm-hmm.
That's why most employers do the accrual, because for my example, with my dance instructors that work 5 hours a month, they're never going to get to 72 hours. But they're on the 1 hour for every 30 hours work, so they're in compliance.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that would probably be the best case too for seasonal employees, right? You front load your seasonal employees. They start, it's ice cream season. They decide to take a week off because you gave them a week off front loaded. But if they're accruing, they might never actually, you might never get to use it. It's gonna be 120 days and it's, they're not working enough. They're barely earning anything. You know, so you've got to weigh all these options. And that's really where having a professional HR person assist you with putting all that in your handbook is really important, because at least at bare minimum has to be communicated very clearly to the employees.
Thank you, Aaron.
Absolutely.
Other questions?
If you front load, you don't have to pay out.
So the follow-up question was, if you pay out, do you have to front load?
Well, I think we clarified that before, that if you front load it you don't pay that out, because if you only do that if you're on an accrual, either cap it and roll it over, or you pay it out. So accrual is separate than the front load policy. So it's really clear to define your policy of what you really want to make sure that that is clear when you have your handbook or your policies for your employees on which method you're using. Just like if you have it called PTO, it's everything, or you call it vacation and sick.
You can't prorate front loading for part-time employees?
There was a question about prorating for part-time employees
Prorating sick time,
On front loading.
on front loading.
prorating sick time, prorating.
Prorating sick time
Yeah,
on part-time employees,
I saw was
Are they
like-
new employees or existing employees?
new or existing?
Existing.
Existing.
See what they have.
Because they do have to have that within the 120 days. If you're front loading, it just needs to be all up at front.
If I have someone who works a 0.6 FTE, do I take the front loaded 72 hours and multiply it by a 0.6 to get what number I should be using?
So I think that's kind of where it comes into play with looking at your employee handbook and the compliance and what it states, because that's going to be the biggest determining factor is if it's clearly set out and then the employee acknowledges it. But again, that's something that Paychex can help with, is kind of break down and get into the nitty-gritty of those aspects. There is a handout from the Michigan Chamber, and it says you may accrue more than 72 hours annually, but the employer can cap usage at 72 hours per year. So do you have to include overtime as hours worked in the calculation for accrual? And we already answered that. And overtime is not included in that. It's just the standard hours work, correct, gentlemen and Nancy?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, same question. Yes, it is. Overtime is not included. Okay, if we are accruing an employee leaves, do we have to pay it out?
If you're what? Accruing?
If you are accruing and the employee leaves, do you have to pay it out?
Depends on what your policy is.
Yes, it really depends on what your policy states. Also, for front-loading part-timers, you calculate their estimated hours worked for the year and have to true up or adjust if they work more than you estimated. You don't have to front-load the 72 hours for part-time.
Well, it depends. If your policy is front load, do front load. It's not going to be anything that you short count. That's why the benefit of having an accrual method. And like I said before, you can have separate policies for part-time and full-time and clarify that.
Mhm.
I feel anytime that you're trying to estimate or do prorated, it leads to a potential nightmare of compliance. It leads to confusion with employees, exactly what the policy is, when things are being loaded, and you're probably setting yourself up for trouble. Accrual probably is always the best method, unless you have a very stable group of salaried employees.
Okay. Any other questions? Yes. Any other questions from the group? Johanna, I'm gonna touch base with you after, because I'm not gonna pull up another document, but we can touch base. I'll send you an email. Any other questions from the virtual attendees? All
And
right.
Johanna, I do see your message, Johanna, and I will take a look at it and we'll get back to you. I'll take a look at page 8 and 9 for you.
Perfect.
Awesome.
All right. Well, thank you everybody for attending. If there are no other questions, we can wrap this up early, and everyone does have the contact information in their bags, and we will also, this will be recording will be available, and as I said, I will follow up with everybody whether they attended virtually or in person, and Lauren is going to put all this also on the YouTube page and all of that stuff. So if you guys have any other questions, we'll be able to be reached. And we can set some time up for even, Aaron or Nancy to even look at going through your HR book and saying, okay, this works, this doesn't work. And, being that person to help you kind of navigate this process and utilizing the technology that they have. So
That's actually kind of my whole role here. I would love to actually schedule with anybody there that would like to go through their policies more in depth, go through what they have in place more in depth, and just kind of have a conversation around where they're at and where they would like to be. We can certainly decide together where we can fill in some of those gaps. And like I said, that's really my whole role here, is just having conversations around current processes and where we can fine tune those with the support. So happy to do that with anybody who is at the meeting today, both virtually or in person. You don't have to reach out to Paychex and find out who you're talking to. It's always going to be me if you're working with Flagstar. So my information will be in the end of the slide as well.
Yep. And we do not bill by the hour, so feel free to schedule time with us. Absolutely free of charge, just to discuss everything we just went over and discuss how to get you in compliance. We love to talk to you folks.
yep, and we can schedule virtual meetings like these at my office. Everyone has my contact information, so I'm happy to schedule virtual meetings with our Paychex individuals, and we can talk about how how we can kind of make this all work for everybody and help you. And like I said, that way it's sometimes when if you don't have a computer at home, but you have one at the office, but you're traveling and it's not movable, we set up virtual things like this all the time with our partners. So that's definitely something I can do. So feel free to reach out to me. As I said, I'll be following up with everybody, and I can schedule some time with Aaron, Nancy, and our partners. All right. Thank you very much for everybody. And thank you very much for joining.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, sure. That looks like that.